So what we're going to be doing tonight is starting by making a spoon. And this is some kind of weird, very strange looking spoon. But so far this semester, we have been focusing within the solids workspace. And if you look at your standard toolbar here, what we've been working with have been creating sketches, extruding those sketches or revolving them, going straight to solid objects, square, cylinder, whatever have you, coil, and then modifying all of those. Now, because of the constraints of the just situation of the semester and us only meeting once a week, we're really just going to continue focusing on the set of solids tool space. We will try to touch on the surface tool space, but we'll see if we can get to that. What we're going to be focusing on tonight is with the solids workspace. You've used all of the, or most all of these other tools, less so much at the bottom here, of all the different selections here. We have not gotten to web, I know, and emboss is something we're still playing about with. What we're going to work with tonight is the create form tool set. Now, so far we've been drawing sketches, flat two-dimensional objects, and extruding those or revolving them and making more complex bodies. One of the other creating spaces is form. And I will open a new project here just to play around with this. The create form and form editing tool set, when you click that, as it usually does, Fusion will switch over your toolbar or your tool space. This is for creating, still working with solids, so creating like a solid object, but more like playing with clay than with just drawing in straight flat planar elements and extruding or changing those around. So effectively, you still have the same similar set of tools of things like when you pull the drop down, you still have like planes and cylinders and spheres. These are all starting points. From these starting points, you can still do things like extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft. And you'll see that the very first selection is still create sketch. You can still create a sketch and then create a form from that. Now, the difference is going to be that in a revolved regular like extruded form or sorry, not an extruded revolve, an extruded form or revolve form, you are working with a very defined shape that you have to manipulate. The only way to manipulate that is through interaction with other shapes, things like extrude or sorry, combining things like drawing with a sketch onto the surface and extrude cutting in or extrude pulling out, things like that. This will allow you to warp a shape. So I'm going to start with just a simple form, sphere, start in the center, just like you would do anything else. And I'm going to drag that out, or you can do it numerically. Let's say 120, sure, why not? And you'll see you have in your toolbox, you have standard definition stuffs. You have also now, though, longitudinal and latitudinal faces. You can adjust this also with the sliders. Grab, and you'll see the plus minus on the slider. Less on the latitudinal faces, more. Same with longitudinal. Fewer. So you end up with just 4. Or you go anything less and it starts making weird shapes. Go back around the other way, you make it far more complex. Now, a word of warning, when you are starting with shapes, remember this, fewer faces is easier to control. So if I dial this way back to something like 4, still might not be enough. So let's say 6. 6 seems workable. 6 and 6. Now, if I manipulate this, it will be a lot easier for me to then make it more detailed later rather than starting with something overly detailed. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense just yet, but hang with me. Now, built into here, the other selection options are symmetry. You can add symmetry directly into this, meaning that it will define a line across your form, And then whatever you do to one side, it will automatically do it to the other in real time. And then your standards operation, new body, new body. There are no changes to this yet because you haven't manipulated anything. So I can hit OK. Now that's just one of your standard ones. I just created a basic form here. From this, you go to your modify section. Now there's a whole lot of stuff in here, and I'm going to encourage you to just play around with this. But the thing we're going to be working with the most for this first part is also on your default tool set, edit form. This will allow you to push, pull, and play around with your form. Now, these forms, and you'll see this first line here, T-spline entity. This is your T-spline entity. This is a new way of looking at forms. So far, and let me open up one of our older ones here. And I'll just go to like the original badges and such. Where was my example of gibberish? Oh no, that's somebody else's. Apologies if this starts bogging down my computer. I don't know why it's been doing that tonight. So far, just looking back at one of the first projects we did, and this is my example of a badge. This is all built on flat planes. You see when I mouse over this area, all a big flat plane. Sorry. Other planes. However, this side has far more little sections, but this is still technically a just defined solid because I select those panels, anything like that, select these faces, they are still what they are. And I can still select edges, anything like that, but I can't really do anything with them. Oh, I must have accidentally opened an additional. However, with this, a T-spline is the three-dimensional version of the fit point spline sketch option. The fit point spline line, this is a three-dimensional version of it. If it makes sense to you, think of like a blanket or a net. When you pull or push on a flat plane, like blanket, you can push or pull upwards, but everything, it's not just pulling one single point. The whole form follows suit. That's the same thing that will happen with this. If I select edit form, you'll see my transform modes. These are just your different options. Leaving it the multi version means you get all the things just like when you were using the move command. All your options come up of scale, pull, revolve, all that same thing. Coordinate space is in your Z space or in your virtual plane space, but the other one is your selection filter. Now, the default is allowing you to select anything. I can select a plane or face rather. I can select just an edge. I can select just a point. You can isolate those out by selecting any of your options here. If I only want to be able to select vertices, a point, I can select just that point. If I want to be able to only select edges, I can only select edges. If I double click on that edge, it selects the entire half. Face, same. Double click on that, it's going to grab the whole thing. And then body means you can only select the entire body. You have your snaps and such, that just allows it to move in certain directions. So let's go back to default all. Well, what happened? What am I actually doing with this? Well, let's play. Selecting a face, and I'm going to grab sometimes it's hard to grab inside, but I'm going to grab just a slider. I pull this face, and it starts to warp the whole thing. This is where you can really start playing. I can grab just that edge. Moves just that edge. One more option that comes up on here. Your standard set of tools, just like any of the other ones. You have your sliders. You have your rotation. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can actually see what I'm doing. I'm rotating that, so wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. your free translation ones, and your scale. This allows you, the solid box allows you to just move it willy-nilly. The edges allow you to scale it in directions. The corner scales in all directions, or at least within that plane. Grabbing the center is your scale omnidirectional, is your uniform scale for anybody that's worked in more Illustrator programs and things. This allows it to shrink and grow scale in all directions. So basically, think of it in terms of this. So far, our solid forms that we've been working with are flat edges that you have to, like, if you had to use like think of it in a workshop space, that you would have to use like saws or drills or screw, or, actually cutting or adding material onto them. The form tools and edit form is more like a lump of clay. You can play around with it, but you can still add and subtract to it too. So it's just one more way of working. I'm going to cancel this just so it goes back to, oh, I guess it didn't. Let's just keep going back. Whoops, not that far back. We still want it. One of the things I told you about is symmetry. You can still add symmetry after the fact. So if I open the drop down, you'll see that there's two selections for each area here. You have mirrored internal, circular internal, mirror duplicate, circular duplicate, duplicate, or clear symmetries, or you can isolate symmetries. Internal means you are creating symmetry within the object you're working on. These other ones means that you are making a symmetrical duplicate of what you're working on. So we're going to stick with mirror internal. So I just selected the first one, which is just mirror internal. Looking down at this sphere, you select one face, and then wherever you select another face, it will create a symmetry line, a green symmetry line between those. So you see it's created there. Now it's showing me between those two lines, it will activate symmetry. Now, another word of warning, I highly recommend creating, if you're going to create symmetry, do it along a major axis. Meaning, if I'm looking at this, you can see the little red line going back and forth across my screen for the x-axis. Do it across an axis. It makes it a lot easier to use some of the other tools. So if I do this, click OK, now it's going to keep that red line. So now when I go to Form Edit, I can start to pull. I select one face. It ghost selects one on the other side. So now as I pull out, it does a mirrored thing to the other side. Great way to create other form, or great way to create a obviously symmetrical form. Now, one of the things you can do with this is you can work on the fly, meaning you can expand and actually extrude on the fly. If you press and hold Alt, then grab and move, it actually creates an extrusion. But you have to do this each time. You have to release Alt, do it again, and it will create more iterations. Now, why would you do this rather than just dragging the whole thing outward? It just makes it easier to create multiple sections. You could scale this sort of thing down or way up, blorp, and now I'm making some kind of like alien hammerhead shark looking thing, whatever. But these are the different ways you can start to manipulate. So I want to show you something else here. Well, rather, first I want to make sure to point something out. We have been working on all of our projects. You're used to being able to look down at the bottom and see your history slider, where you can go back in history, make changes, drop things in however you like. However, looking at the model here of the spoon that I made, you don't really have many. There's some edits, there's some move. Well, same thing with what I've been doing here. Fusion will not save your edit form changes. So if you need to make changes and you want to revert back, it needs to be within the same timeline. Now, you can intentionally activate the time, or sorry, the time, intentionally record timeline, but it does not do this by default. So if you are going to be making changes, do it in a single session. Or at least if you're going to be backing up, do it in the same session. Now, one of the other things, why is it all round like this? Say like, all right, it makes sense on a sphere, but let me hide that, or I'll finish this form. Let me expand this. I'm going to hide this one. I'm going to create another form, and I'm going to start with a box. So this would be like a three-dimensional rectangle. Start in the center, go outward, doesn't really matter. Vertical. Why is it round? Well, this is because it's in the form edit space. It's assuming you are going to be playing around with making more rounded organic shapes. If you wanted a solid rectangular form, you would probably be making it within the regular form, or the regular form space, the regular solid space, making a straight rectangle, or sorry, cube or cylinder or something like that. However, you can alter this. So I'm just going to leave that at default, wherever it is right there. That's fine. As you are working and say like your form gets more complex, or you're having difficulty keeping things straight, like seeing what you're doing, next to symmetry to the right, you'll see the first option, and again, drop down utilities, you make a few, there's a few of them, is display mode. This is so you can simplify your T-spline object, in this case, this kind of rectangle form. I'm going to select the whole thing, and I can cycle through display modes. Now, it shows it as a sharp rectangle. This is simply to allow me to see what I'm doing a little more easily. You can also do the blended version, which has a reference box on the outside, but your actual object on the inside. So now when I go to, say, edit form, I can select by the simple sides and move those out. Oops, I grabbed the scale instead of the move. So I can warp this all around and everything, but it's showing me the rounded computed side, but it's also showing these little constraint points that allow me to work a little more simply. So these are just different modes of observing what you're working with. It does not actually alter the form, having this display box on or not. It simply allows you to see what you're doing a little more easily. And now I've created this like weird, I don't know, bitten off tongue mitten hand thing. Anyway, so these reference lines are just that, reference lines. Your actual object is within that. You want to go back to showing what it's actually supposed to look like, back to smooth. There we are. That's all. So those are the very, very basics of working with form edits, or rather creating forms and form edits. So what we're going to do tonight is actually put some of that to use. So first off, I want to do a ready check for everybody. Okay. So spoon, or whatever utensil you want to work with. We're going to be using the create form and form edit tools to create three-dimensional objects that are like, well, in this case, a spoon. And the reason for this is, so far, like we said, we've been working with much more rigid construction methods. This will allow us to make more rounded organic shapes and manipulate them from there. So like I said, one of the downsides is, and you work through the slider bar here, the history slider rather, sorry, there's not really any changes because it doesn't record everything outright. And now it's not letting me go back to current. So that's weird. Irrelevant. Anyway, so let's start fresh. So first things first, as you're learning this, I would recommend working from an image. So just like we've worked with an image or an image canvas several times already, I'm going to start with this. So let's insert a canvas. Going to go on from computer, and I have a spoon. You select your plane, and you can start scaling it up and such from there. These are the same tools. You can move it if you like, but remember the sliders do just that. Rotation does just that. And if you zoom in, your flat sides scale in one direction. The corner, rounded corner, scales in multi-direction. Now, one of the things is that is scaling by a scale factor, meaning in multiples of. You don't really have a definition of actually how big this is. I'm going to show you how to adjust that. So one thing, I want to flip this because that is irritating. And for whatever reason, I like working kind of left to right, or at least the larger part to the left. Just personal preference. You can use the little flip icons here to flip it back, to flip your image back and forth. Horizontal flip really doesn't matter because it's symmetrical. So, okay. So first, like I said, I need to actually make this the right size. And I forgot to grab a spoon, but we're going to say that most like standard spoons probably going to be about 160 millimeters from end to end. So expand the canvas, right click on spoon, and below edit canvas is calibrate. This allows you to pick just points on your canvas. And I'm going to go from one end to the other. And you see, it tells me, all right, that measurement, just like inspection would tell you, is from there to there. It's 91 point yada, 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 yada. Well, I want that to measure 160 millimeters. Scales it up. Now I have a working scale size. Awesome. So now I know this is about the right size that I should have. Okay. Before we go any further, don't forget, save your project, because I almost forgot. Not in badges and such. I want to make sure it is in the correct folder. Yes. Where are my folders? What is it doing? Okay, don't know why it's doing that. I'll pick one later. All right. Or I have to move it later. Example. Spoon. Okay. So I'm going to start with create form. Change this over to my workspace. Now, we're going to use a combination of two different forms, modify them, merge them together, and then we're going to thicken them. So let's have a look at some tools. We're going to start first with the spoon, ladle, handle, whatever you want to call it. Now, of course, as we go through this, you'll be able to see that there are multiple ways of going about this. I'm just going to show you a way, and we can play around with other options. So first, I'm going to start with a sphere. That seems reasonable. I'm going to start on this plane, and I want to put a sphere roughly right in the center on my work plane, right in the center of my spoon, and I want it about the shape of the bowl. So I'm just going to expand it up to about where I think a spoon bowl should be. That seems roughly rightish. Great. As I said before, you want to minimize the amount of faces you have to work with. 8, I don't know about 8 latitudinal. Let's go with 6. That's a little bit easier for me to work with. I can always manipulate it later if I need to. Symmetry. Well, let's go ahead and add symmetry now. Now it's going to allow, now this is the part that gets a little confusing, but remember you can do it afterwards also. So if I choose length, double check. Nah, I don't want that. Width. Nah, I don't want that. Height. Nah, I don't want that. So the issue is actually looking straight down. I actually wanted my object to be lined up with that axis. So that's okay. So what I'll do is I'll finish this, click OK. Now I'm going to use the same move command, standard move, select that, and I just want to rotate this so that my major axis is on, or so that the axis of the spoon is in line with my Y axis here, just because it's going to make it easier for me. Because now, hit OK, orbit back around. Now I select symmetry. Now I can select cross two faces. Now my symmetry line is going to be in line with that axis. Just going to make things easier for myself. Okay. All right. So now I have symmetry placed along there, and I have just a weird warp, or now I have a weird semi-spoon going here. All right. Now to start modifying. So would I select the edit form and start warping it? Not yet. What I want to do, and what we haven't been able to do as of yet, I'm going to delete some of this just right off the bat. So I'm going to use my from the right selection box. That's going to select all the faces that touched, or better yet, let's look at it from the right side itself. And I'm going to select up to there and just hit delete. Bloop. Now when I orbit up, you see this is like an open bowl. That's exactly what I want. I want this to just be like half of it. So I do actually just want half of a sphere. So select those sets, delete that. There we are. Now I just have a bowl form to work with. Convenient. Now I can work with the edit form and start playing around. Since I already have symmetry applied, if I accidentally forget to grab two sides, it does it for me. So you're going to find different ways of working that fit your preference. Now, from first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the top, and I'm going to just warp this form to kind of fit the profile. And then I'm going to work from the side. Oops, that's upside down. And get the shape of the spoon kind of right. So at this point, if you haven't already, you should probably go grab an actual spoon so you actually have it physically in front of you. But we're just going to freeform it here. All right. So let me zoom in here, and I'm going to focus on just the scoop part. So a lot of times I like working with just the vertices. So I'm going to put my filter up, my selection filter on the toolbox of edit form, and select only vertexes. So now I can drag this around, and I'm only working with the very top layer first. No real reason, no real preference, just playing around with it. Mainly just so I can kind of get my shape, how I think it might work. Now I can go and select other parts. Selecting a couple other vertices. Now this sometimes causes problems. And I'll show you what I mean. I've gotten this weird little cup thing going. I don't know what happened there. Oops. So what I'll have to do is figure something out here. Well, let's go to all. I'll select that line there, and let's see what I can do about that. Try scaling that. Nope, that ain't going to work. Then let's try warping it. Not quite. Okay, fine. We'll just reverse a couple of steps here. So the reason that stayed put that way is sometimes it just doesn't translate properly. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and select maybe I'll just back up enough. There we are. Resize to fit. So maybe instead what I'll do is make sure to grab both of these vertices this time. So looking at it from the top, I'm going to grab both of these. Make sure I actually grab both of them. There we are. Now I warp it forward, and it's all following suit. Great. Bring those back a bit. And let's see here. Move those two. There we are. And that's looking not awful. All right, so roughly have a bowl. Now let's look underneath and see what we need to warp. A lot. Okay. So let's select with just the lines now. So now if I select with just the edges, well, that's going to grab all of them. So I better use my select from the left option. All righty. Now I'm just going to shrink this up a bit. Again. Shrink upwards. Going to warp around a little bit. So this is where you just play around. You're going to find different ways of working. You're going to find different ways of seeing what does and doesn't work for you. Now, one of the other things is so far, I haven't broken this plane line. You can definitely do that. Like here, your spoon probably scoops up a little bit. Same for the back. Get a little bit more reasonable size here. And we can just start playing. Got this kind of weird indentation here. Don't know if I like that. Try scaling that back a little bit. Well, that's going to mess with my overall size. I don't want to do that. If I start playing with vertices, I can grab that one and hold down select, grab both of those. And let's kind of warp this a little bit. Granted, my spoon is quickly turning into something more of a boat, but we'll deal with that later. Now, you'll notice on some of here, if I zoom in here, especially on vertices, these little red lines appear. These are just like on your fit point splines. These are your handlebars. You can grab these and you can warp that as well. So this is how you can adjust some of these lines here and play around. Scaling is definitely not what you meant to do there. But these are only on your edges, on your absolute edge lines. So that's going to allow you to warp this. You can just grab the thing. You can scale these lines out, in, whatever. So those are your ways you can adjust your edges themselves. So, okay, so for now, that appears to be something spoon bowl-like. Granted, that's a heck of a spoon and probably getting closer to ladle, but that works. Okay. So now I want to work on making the handle. Now, could I have made like the whole thing out of that single sphere? Yeah, probably. But I want to show you how to do some different works here. I'm going to go to top. Now I'm going to select plane. This is essentially, well, it's a plane. It's making a flat surface, only it is a T-spline plane, which means you can manipulate it. So I'm going to click that tool. Yes, I'm working on the same plane. Now, this allows you to start with your standard sizing. You have two different options. You have center rectangle and 2-point rectangle. Center rectangle works exactly the same as the sketch option. So I'm going to start somewhere on my y-axis here. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I say somewhere because I'm going to add to this. So I'm going to draw this outward. I do not want it to get too big. So let's just say 100 by 10. Okay, that works. Oops, I said 10, dang it. Okay. All right, so now I only have one major subdivision here. That's problematic. Also, this whole edge is not really where I want it to be. So first, I'm going to move this in place. So select the whole body, press move, and let's drag it a little bit further away. But I've got a gap here. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to use a command later called bridge and actually draw a bridge between the two surfaces. Basically, it works very similarly to a loft command, only in a flat space. But right now, just wanted to move that. Great. Okay. So like I said, we can warp this around. We can play around with this. Great. But a couple of problems. Well, one, This might be a bit too big, but also I kind of wanted to add some parts in there. Now I can modify. The next tool that I want to show is called Insert Edge. Now I place this into my toolbar. It might not be in yours. So if you expand your modify tool, in the very next section from Edit Form is Insert Edge. If you click the three dots, you can add that to your toolbar and shortcuts. So I'm going to select Insert Edge. You can select whatever edge you like, but what I want is right here. So let me double click that line. So now I have this highlighted, this line, and now you see this little green line here. What I'm going to be able to do, pardon me, is add segmentation. So like with my sphere, it already had all of these different segments. With a flat plane, it didn't allow me to do that right off the bat. So I'm going to just add some manually. And you have your options. You have your insertion mode, simple, exact. Just keep it simple. Why not? Insertion side, do I want it to set on one side or do I want it on both sides? Both sides, actually, in this case. Location, these are increments of up to 1 down to 0, so meaning that it's going to automatically add, if it's at 0.5, half, it's going to add the line right in between the start edge and the next available edge. So if this is less, it's closer. If it's closer to 1, it's closer to the outer edge. But 0.5 works just fine. Okay, now I have different segments. I got something to work with. If I had made this too small, I could also, using the edit form command, I'm going to go to edge, select that side, and I can extrude additional edges. So if I hold down Alt and drag outward, you see it's adding to that. But I don't need that in this case. So I'll Control Z both of those. There we are. Now, before I start, and I should have done this before I even added the edges, make sure to add symmetry. Simple mirrored internal symmetry from side to side. Select one side, select the other. Starting there. Starting there. What is it doing? Why is it doing this unless it already has symmetry based? There we go. I don't know why it selected that, had me select vertices. Just across two faces. Now you won't immediately see it because that plane is right on my axis and that axis is already green, but that's what I want. Now it has the same type of symmetry across from side to side, across the two faces, as the bowl of my spoon does. Great. Now I can go in and play with this a bit. So edit form. I'm just going to use the vertices again. Grab to there. Now I can start playing around with this. Move upwards. Expand out. That one. I can move downward, kind of make this rounded a bit. Can actually even rotate. That's not really doing anything for that, so leave it 0 degrees. Now we'll go with edge. Now I can select the edge here. Now I can rotate. It's going to keep warping it. Anything like that. Yeah, play around. Scale that up. This kind of works like the offset tool. So play around with it. But basically, I'm just trying to get it to roughly, or in this case, as close as I can, model against my canvas underneath. So I'm just dragging this around, getting it about as close to where I want it to be. And down here, let's shrink that in a bit. Great. Okay. Now, so far, this is still only a flat planar thing. So I can still go back. I do want to actually add some curvature to the spoon here. So let's do edit form again. I want to be selecting the whole edge because I want to select like against these edge lines here. So, all right, that makes it very difficult to see what I'm doing. I'm going to, well, let's start with that. And what I'm selecting is that whole front edge. I'm just going to bring it upwards a little bit, and it's easier to see from the side. I want to get it close-ish to where this is going to be. Do the same over here. Let's move that up a little bit higher. Higher. And you see that these are not independent from one another. As I move this one, the previous one moves up and down as well. That's the whole point of a spline. It's not an independent section. One element interacts with the other. So looking from the right, yeah, it's a little extreme of a curve, but yeah, that's probably fine. Okay. Select OK there. That's working well. Now, so far, I want you to take note. I'm still in the same form. I have not added additional forms or anything like that. Just like in the sketch surface, or sorry, under the sketch toolbar, this is basically the same thing. I'm working on all the same sketch, only in this case it's a 3-dimensional sketch, so it's a form. I have not made any finishes. Nothing's going to change if I hit finish, but I'm still completing a form here. All right. The next step is I want to bridge. Now this will actually, and you see there's two options. There's merge and there's bridge. Merge brings those two together. Bridge, just like the title, and as it says, creates an additional segment between two faces. So that is the tool that I will use to go between here. So side one, I'm moving from that side. Now select side two, sorry. Those. So let me zoom in a little bit. What I selected, side one is this whole side. Side two is this big wide section here. Now, this is one of the few tools in Fusion that actually gives you a preview of what you're about to do. So click the preview checkbox. And this is why I showed you the utilities earlier. What it's showing you, this weird angular thing, this is showing you the display mode of that. That's why it looks like that. You can choose to keep creased edges, which will keep it sharper. So I'm going to see what this looks like. Click OK. Bloop. And it automatically blends the two together, but adds a segment in there. Pretty neat. Now I can still warp and modify this as I care to. Because like the backside here of the spoon, that's pretty funky looking. But it's definitely added plenty of sections to this. So this is a convenient way of making a, so far, surface thickness spoon. What I mean by that is this doesn't actually have any thickness to it. It is like literally as thick as just a surface plane. Basically, if this were paper, doesn't have actually any dimension to it yet. All right, now we're going to use one more tool, the thicken tool. And yes, these are going to all be on the list as new reference. Now I'm going to use the thicken tool. This will allow me to thicken any body. So T-spline body, select the whole thing. Now I can actually add dimension to this. So this is another one like the shell tool. If you use the slider, it can bog down your computer. I'm just going to put in like 3 millimeters and let it go. Now, again, it is giving me this display box around the thing because to save computing power, it's not going to automatically model the whole thing in real time. You can see, all right, yeah, 3 millimeters. That seems pretty reasonable. Okay. Now you have other options here. Thicken type, sharp, soft, or no edge. Sharp will keep the sides angular. So you see the display box, how they are still very sharp cornered. It will actually basically just thicken in the offset command model. However, if you pick soft, it will actually smooth the whole thing out. Direction, I would just leave it as normal. Click OK. And let's see how long it takes. Hooray! Now I have a softened or soft-edged, oddly thick, bold spoon. All right, so this is more like it just carved out of wood, but, you know, whatever. They say he carved it from a bigger spoon. And that is roughly it. So I'm going to finish the form. And because I can't not let that go away, I'm going to bring up the appearance box, and I am definitely going to make that out of wood. Ooh, walnut. It's not showing it very well. I'll have to use something else. Fine, we'll use something like cherry. That looks prettier anyway. Okay. So now I apparently have a wooden spoon. Now, can you still modify this? Absolutely. I just finished the section. I can go back just like anything else in a history slider and adjust it. But what I want you to take note of is look down at the history slider. There's only the form command. So this is why I say you kind of have to complete this in a setting, in one sitting. Kind of. You can save where you are and just continue, but it will not save reversing what you've done. So this might be one of those areas where you might want to save what you're doing and copy it or so before you make more steps. But honestly, probably pretty well good. So that is how to create a spoon. If you want to start adding features to this, you can do that very similarly to how we have worked in the past. Say like, all right, I like my spoon, but I want it to be a spork or a ladle. All right, I'm going to go up. I'm going to start a sketch on my plane here. And let's see here. I want to, the center circle, smack in the middle, 2 millimeter hole. Sure. Now I'm going to use, let's see, going to use the rectangular pattern command. And let's see, I'm going to slide outward, one direction. Sure. Now I'm going to use the circular pattern command, which I had actually added to my toolbar. And now I'm going to use those two. My center point is around that center. And let's just add a bunch of these. Is it a spoon or is it a ladle or a speaker? Somewhere in between. Okay. Finish sketch. Now I can use from the left selection box, select all my circles, extrude all of those downward. Click OK, hides my sketches. Now I have a strainer. You could do something similar and add maybe another sketch. And let's see here. I'll use a centerline rectangle from, say, like there to there. How wide do I want this? 2 millimeters? Sure. And let's say 40. Great. And we'll do a circle at the center there just to round this over. Super duper. Trim. Just to round this out a bit. Hit escape to finish. And now I'll use the rectangle pattern again. I want this, and we're going to make multiples, but the direction type, I want it going symmetrical, so it goes in both directions. Quantity, let's say 5. Great. Evenly space them out. Oops, I forgot to add my selection of the actual end there. That makes it, nope, the end. Thank you. There we are. Click OK. Same deal. Finish sketch. Extrude. I want all of those. Direction needs to go in both directions. And makes big giant blow up. Cut. And now I have a strainer slash spork stabber, whatever. Okay. So those are the steps to work out making a basic spoon, and then how to add features and such to modify it. Now, can I still continue to add features? Absolutely. What if I also wanted to, like in the example, I was playing around and added like these little wings and things like that? You can continue to expand on features. I could go back, edit the feature, and what I had done before is, you see how I have these side faces? I can independently extrude and play around with any of this stuff as well. Say I wanted just to make the neck a little bit wider. Let's select there, edit feature. Like I'd said before, you can press and hold Alt before sliding, and it will extrude outward. Now, that's kind of a little extreme. Oh, it's not letting me for some reason. Oh, that's because that's on the bridge. I think it's confusing itself. Fine. We'll go maybe on the side there. Oh, I didn't have the selection feature. That's why. Press and hold Alt. Now we got it. So I don't know why you might want to add like cobra wings to this. Seems a little odd, but hey, it's a thing you could totally do. You wanted to add in like a thumb indentation in the top here. You could select maybe just the face and drag that one down a little bit and sink it in a bit. Definitely making some weird features here. Click OK. Finish form. It recalculates. Now I have a very odd looking neck on my spoon. My spoon is feeling threatened. So there you go. So your assignment is going to be to make 3 different utensils. You can make spoons. You could make forks the same way. You can try making knives. How might you go about making a knife? Simple variation. Let me save what I've done here, and I'll start another one. This will be saved as example. Oops, if I could spell example. Knife. All right. So from here, pardon me, there's different ways you can go about it, but I'm going to start freeform, edit form, and I'm going to just create from a plane directly. I'm going to make this upright. So I'm going to work on this face, or sorry, this plane, and I'm going to intentionally build this in 2 sections. So first, I'm going to start from a 2-point selection. Somewhere, I'm going to use my y-axis as my divide, meaning one side will be the blade, one side will be the handle. So I'm just making a rectangle. I'm going to stay on like my lines here. Let's see here. We'll say 30 millimeters seems small. Let's say 50 for that one. And then length. Well, a standard handle. All right, apparently my spoon was really small. So let's say the handle is about 150. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay. And I don't know why it jumped up there, but there we are. So I created my plane, and I can add segments from here. So that'll work great. I did not want to do that. I'm going to keep that at 50. Symmetry, none yet. Click OK. I do want to move this whole to-do down a bit. I'm trying to put this right on that plane. Whoops, what just happened? Okay. So what I'm going to do with this, and I just shifted the coloration again. With this, I can edit my form and create more of a handle. So what I'm going to do is just play around with making this a bit more rounded. And the other thing I can do is if I had actually added segments, which I could still do, but if I'd counted how many fingers people tend to have, you can grab an odd number of vertices, and if I drag those upwards, I can start to create a like curved handle. Okay, and then let's see here. Let's grab all of those. Oops, I forgot that I was on that selection. Grab vertices, grab all those, and I'll just drag these down just a little bit. And let's make the back of the handle come outwards about that way. Neat. Because the reason I'm building this way is what I can do is next use the thicken command. I want this to go outward. So a handle, let's see what makes sense for the thickness of a handle. Maybe 3 millimeters total. So, well, let's say 4. That actually still seems quite small. Yeah, 4. Okay. Soft extrusion. Well, the problem is that's going to do some weird stuff. So actually, I want to back up. Thicken. I'm going to keep this as a sharp edge, and you'll see why. So let's make that a little bit thicker. Let's say 5. That seems more reasonable. Okay. So now what I'm going to end up doing is I actually want to thicken this on the other side as well. Well, I could mirror this, which, let's see here. I'm not finding mirror. Oh, right. Duplicate. I mirror this object. My mirror plane is the actual plane. And now it'll throw 2 sections across. Okay. Now, are these 2 actual different things? Nope. It automatically joined them because they were right against one another. Great. So this can become part of my handle. Now I can edit this form as well. And I can grab like edges all along that. And let's see. Let's kind of just drag that edge in a little bit, and that'll let it smooth a bit. Things like that. So you can play around with that stuff. You can still add other elements, or you can still add curvatures and things like that. Okay. I can do the blade the same way, not the same way. So I'm going to create another plane. Use a 2-point, and I'm going to start, pardon me, right against it. Now, I have to draw it in a rectangle. That's okay. Sure, 45, that seems reasonable, and I don't know, 200. Sure, whatever. Okay, what just happened? Why did my plane snap over there? That's very strange. I don't know why it did that. Okay. Now, for segments, up to you. Obviously, you can play around with this. So I'm just going to leave it as, well, let's see here. I'm going to add a couple of segments this way. Okay. Now, remember how before I could delete sections? I could do the same here, and I'll show you what happens with this. This ends up getting pretty cool. So I'm going to delete just a vertex for now. The whole form recalculates to those. Now I could say, delete this whole edge. Let's see what happens there. Not good. So this is how you can start to manipulate some of the different points. So I'm going to select those two vertices. Okay, it just made a stumpy knife. Okay, so really just working with that corner, that's fine. But you can play around with it some more. Vertex, or sorry, edit form, vertex. I can drag that one out, make more of a pointy knife. I could, let's see what happens if I warp this. Something to that effect. Still playing around with this. If you want, you could start to select, like, say, an entire edge. And I could warp this a bit. Now I'm making a cutlass, apparently. So maybe not that one. But you see how I can start to play with this. Now, what if I wanted to actually create more of a, like a bevel on the blade? Like, click OK. So you looking around right now, it's just that one singular plane thick. I can insert an edge. I'm going to leave it as simple. What I want to select is this whole front edge now. And I just double clicked on one of those edges. And yes, it's going to give you an error code because you had that deletion there. And I'm going to drag inward, if it'll let me. Oh, we're in faces that are not four-sided. Ah, poop. All right, so it's not going to let me do it there because one of the constraints is an edge. It works off of angles. And in here, because I deleted that corner, it's not going to let me create an edge because it is only three-sided. So mild problem. Okay, well, we'll deal with that in time. I might be able to, let's see if I can add an edge. Just the one. What's it going to do to me there? Well, let me do that. We'll try that. Nope, still error. Okay, well, oh well. We can play with this in a bit and figure out what I could do about that form. Anyway, I can still do the same issue. I can still do the same thing here, though, in that I can thicken this plane. I'm going to leave it as sharp corner, and we'll say 2 millimeter. If I had added symmetry prior to this extrusion, or sorry, this thicken tool would have done it to both sides. But go to mirror duplicate, select that body. I'm going to select the plane. Remember, sometimes it's hard to see. I am selecting my origin plane. Let me hide the handle so you can see what I'm doing more easily. And it just threw it on the other side of that plane. Weld. This is the same thing as join. If I select no, it'll leave these as two separate. Weld is what happens is it just fuses the two sides together. It's just a similar terminology, but different because reasons. Okay. Now I have those sections. Now I can probably play around with this a bit more. So let's go to edit form, select edge. Because that now is symmetrical on both sides, I want to select that edge, but double click it so it selects all of those. Now I can drag upwards. Well, maybe not drag upwards. I'll have to use a scale tool. Let's see if that works. Oh God, no, that's not. Use a scale on this one. There we go. Kind of ish. So play around with it. Maybe what I have to do is instead go the opposite direction. And instead of that one, I will select the inner one and drag that down and out. That is a funky blade. Maybe I have to scale it. Oh, that's so much worse. Anyway, play around, see what you come up with. Obviously, that's not going to work nearly as well as I'd hoped, but play around with it. Select OK. I'll finish that. I'll unhide bodies. And now I basically have a knife. It's not as good, and it's still in two sections. If I want to merge these together, select the two, and it's not on here. So basically I could just use the combine command and join them. But I want to leave those separate for now because I might go back and work on it. But we'll put an appearance on. And why not? We'll put mahogany for the handle. Oops, I did not weld those two sides together. That is problematic. So what I do need to do is go back. It's not going to let me. So I accidentally left this as two different sides. So this is, I do want to select those two, combine, join that. Now my handle is one section. I did not have the weld checkbox selected when I used the mirror duplicate to create the handle. So now that is all rich mahogany. And we'll go with something shiny metal. Ooh, platinum. Why not make a platinum blade? Because you can. Shift back to shift back to coloration mode. And there we are. So not a good blade. I'll have to work at that some more, but those are the basics. So I'll save there, and you'll have these examples. So your assignment is going to be to make 3 different utensils. Play around, play with the edit form features, and going to experiment. We're going to work with these, and we're going to work with edit form some more next week. So I will stop the recording there and address any questions. Pardon me. All righty. So there is our set of spoon, or a spoon, a very awkward knife. Questions from anybody? At the moment, at least. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So we are going to be working with this stuff, the form edit tools, for the next couple of weeks. This will be due not this coming class, but we will be moving on this coming class. So these will be due, well, I can't put it for Monday, but we'll check in with how everybody's doing. And the problem is then the following class is Patriots Day. There's no class that day. So we'll adjust that. But start working on them, and I will check on the date, because ultimately the next available date would be April 26th, and that's kind of the end. Not the end of class, but that's more or less. So what we're going to be doing is adding to this form editing techniques. So you can start working on them, and then we'll pick up some more techniques and such next week. So you might want to apply that. There will be one other small project for this before we begin discussions on final projects. And that will be addressed starting next week. I will be posting the final assignment on a Blackboard. Remember, that's going to be due on May 10th. So that's the final exam project. Don't worry about it. I just want you to start getting some ideas together. On that, does anyone have any questions, either about how we're conducting the remainder of the semester, questions about this, or at the moment at least, form editing, or the final project, like what could we or could we not do, things like that. And if that's just out of sight, out of mind at the moment, I totally understand that too. Okay. Pretty well straight out. Okay, everybody. Well, those examples are on, pardon me, sorry. Those examples are on Fusion, or saved in the new file under next assignment, which is 06, form edit utensils. And I just got to move those because I accidentally plopped them in the wrong folder. But play around, experiment, and we'll see what you have next week. And we will continue working with the form edit tools next week. All right, everybody. If you have any questions or anything else, you want to hang out for a second, do so. Otherwise, we will see you all next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.